One of my hills that I will die on is I think it's less useful to go around parsing out who's a pedophile and who's not a pedophile and just focus on the crime. It doesn't matter what their psychological DSM-5 diagnosis is. It doesn't matter even who they're attracted to. What matters is who they rape, who they violate, who they abuse. And they are interested in having power and control over people. And the least powerful people are children. And especially in the case of trafficking, usually young people who've experienced abuse in their families are often on the street or in foster care and then are targeted for trafficking. Megyn Kelly is like making a straw man argument to try to excuse the fact that all these powerful, rich men abused children, raped children.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell the stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. Today, our guest is Laura Norton-Cruz. Laura is a licensed master social worker, former teacher, victim advocate, artist, and the mother of 2 elementary-age children. Over the past 2 years, she has produced 3 documentaries with filmmaker Joshua Albeza Brandstetter. The first, At Home, In Home, Rural Alaska Childcare Crisis, was based in Kotzebue and highlighted the dire lack of childcare in that community. The second, released in April of this past year, was called ILP and focused on the infant learning program in the Mat-Su Valley. Her most recent, Growing the Kenai Childcare Licensing, illuminated obstacles to licensed childcare in Alaska. Last week, she published an op-ed in the Mississippi Free Press entitled Raising Teens in the Era of the Epstein Files. And that will frame our discussion for the second half of today's interview. Laura supports My House Bill 101, which would raise the age of consent in Alaska from 16 to 18. This bill prevents sexual victimization of young people by predators who take advantage of Alaska's low age of consent. Today's episode will have frank discussions of sexual abuse and assault. Laura Norton-Cruz, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
So, were you born in Anchorage?
I was not. I was born on Travis Air Force Base. My dad was in the Air Force there, and we moved to Anchorage when I was 10, when he got out of the Air Force, actually.
Okay. So, were you in California?
Vacaville, California?
Yeah. Some people call it Napa. It's not.
Yeah. So it was a drive to get to Napa.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up like climbing walnut trees and like smashing walnuts with hammers and eating them. And
it's fun.
It was a very California existence. And then we moved here. But my dad's best friend from med school was up here. And so we would always visit Alaska and wanted to get here.
And it was because of your dad's best friend that you guys had your eyes on Alaska?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I made friends here and I was pretty happy. I learned how to hike. That was like a new thing when I was 10. Learned how to play in the woods, learned how to play in the snow and sled. And
did you grow up on the west side?
No, actually east side. I was always east side kid until after both my kids were born. Then I moved to the west side.
Really? Did you graduate from East?
I did sports for East. I went to Stellar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I always did swimming, cross-country running, cross-country skiing at East.
What did your parents do?
My dad joined the Air Force. He grew up really poor, and he joined the Air Force so that they would pay for medical school. So he was an Air Force doctor, a pediatric radiologist. And then when we moved here, I think he expanded into seeing adults as well, adult patients.
So he's a pediatric radiologist in the Air Force.
Yeah. And then he did all ages radiology until he retired. And then my mom was an RN. Then she became an advanced nurse practitioner doing women's health when we were in California. And she worked in Davis. So I did some of my schooling in Davis. And then she became a certified nurse midwife. And so she does like full spectrum women's health. She retired from births just a year ago. Yeah. So she had been doing births, but now she's doing full spectrum women's health with a certification and specialization in menopause. Yeah.
With both your parents working in medicine, did you ever consider doing medicine?
Not really. No. I always love like health and healthcare, and we talked about it. And I've always had a very sort of medical scientific approach to nutrition and physiology and exercise, and I talk that way, but I don't know, I just didn't really want to do direct patient care. I decided when I was 17, before I went to college, I was like, I want to work on preventing child sexual abuse and helping children who've been abused to heal and advocate for justice and systems that reduce abuse. That was my vision as a 17-year-old.
Do you remember at 17 how you learned about child sex abuse?
My mom. Yeah, my mom taught me all about it. She gave me and my sister like comprehensive lessons on personal safety and what your rights are, and that she will believe us no matter who the abuser is, and how to fight. And
how old were you when she started giving you those lessons?
8. And it was prompted by her remembering that her father had sexually abused her. So she like sat us down at the kitchen table, told us that, and then gave us a bunch of lessons on safety and rights. And
did you know your maternal grandparents?
yeah. I didn't ever like my grandfather, but obviously I hated him after that. Yeah, and then he died when I was 14, I think. I was not sad that he died. That shaped my sense of justice my whole life. As a little kid, I conceived of it as, I want to beat up abusers. I want to be a superhero. And then as a 17-year-old, I'm like, okay, I can probably do this as a psychologist or something. I wasn't really sure what the career was. I just knew I wanted to work on child sexual abuse as a social justice issue.
And then you decided to go to college in the lower 48.
I did, yeah. Since I had already lived on the West Coast and then I lived in Alaska, I was like, I'm going to go to the East Coast just because. And we had visited there once when I was 9 and I loved it. So I ended up applying early to Mount Holyoke College, which was the first women's college in the country, founded in 1837. 2,000 students, liberal arts college, only women, which includes trans men and trans women and non-binary students assigned female at birth.
So you went to Mount Holyoke, and what did you major in?
Critical social thought. I was doing a lot of art classes because I'm a visual artist too. I was taking a lot of art classes at UAA and Spanish classes. So I thought I was going to be a studio art major. I ended up being a studio art minor, and then critical social thought was my major.
Was it intentional for you to go to a women's college?
My sister had gone to Mills, which was the second women's college in the country in California. And I just saw that she took school so much more seriously at a women's college and was more confident and less distracted. And so I was like, seems like a good idea. I guess I didn't feel the same need for it, but I saw that it was good for her. And I had more male friends growing up. And I had some female friends in high school, and they were really wonderful and nurturing. But I was surrounded by my boyfriend and his friends, and they were mean. They bullied me, and they never laughed at my jokes. And like, I was this little feminist and it bothered me, but I didn't know that I could do anything about it. And when I got to a women's college, I was like, wait, they laugh at my jokes. And I feel like an equal with everyone here. This is great. And so I really developed sisterhood. My friends there taught me how to have affection, how to touch and be comfortable. It was wonderful. It was such a good experience being surrounded by women in sisterhood.
I can hear that. I'm curious about if you think that there's the same value in teen boys deciding to go to an all-male school.
I think there could be. I don't know a lot about all-male schools and how they would encourage a safe, warm environment. There aren't as many of them, but there are some. I do think boys should be taught and socialized to nurture each other and be good friends to each other and talk about things openly. I just don't know what environments really create that for boys and for young men. A lot of them find that in female friendships, right? If they aren't blocked from being able to treat women as friends, a lot of them get that kind of open vulnerability in their female friendships. No, I don't know. It's a good question because I do feel like one of my social justice issues is I want men to heal each other, to provide safe environments for each other because women are exhausted from carrying it.
I grew up, all my friends were female. And then when I was in junior high, I went 1 year to a private school and it was segregated, boys' classes and girls' classes.
Oh, interesting.
It was the worst nightmare of my life.
Yeah,
it was
probably the
terrible.
opposite, right?
Yeah. The opposite of empowering. It was the worst.
I can imagine that would be likely, unfortunately.
Which I think that's an interesting perspective. Why is an all-male environment so uncomfortable for many reasons? And whereas an all-female environment feels more supportive and empowering.
Yeah, I think girls and women tend to temper boys and men to get them to behave more compassionately. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think if boys were socialized differently, it would be a different story. But because of the way that boys are socialized to suppress emotions and practice dominance as a way of dealing with vulnerability, that's why girls and women benefit so much from separate spaces so that we don't have to shoulder that violence and that threat of violence and that need to dominate and talk over us when we're trying to share our ideas in class.
Mm-hmm. So you graduated from Mount Holyoke and then you decided to go to grad school in Michigan?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So I taught third grade.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I joined Teach for America. I have mixed feelings and thoughts about Teach for America, generally critical of the program, but
We don't have Teach for America in Alaska.
Yeah.
And this came up in my interview with Jared Bryant, the superintendent of Anchorage School District.
Yeah.
Because he is a product of Teach for America. And my mind was blown that we don't have it in Alaska. But before we get there, let's talk about
Sure.
your experience with Teach for America.
Yeah. They came in and gave a presentation in one of my classes, and I was like, I should learn how to teach. I know I want to work with kids my whole life, and I know I want to work on child protection and child empowerment. So I was like, teaching is a good idea. So that's why I applied. I got in. It was a really competitive program, but it's a program where they recruit high-performing college students to come teach, to make a commitment to teach for 2 years in low-income school districts that are struggling with low test scores or low performance. And then they can continue to teach, but their goal is to give people classroom experience so that they take that into whatever professions they do. And it has informed my entire life. So I agree with that part of it. My concern is that it puts these underprepared young people in classrooms because we have a 5-week intensive training, and then we get our teacher education while we are teaching. So we have an emergency certificate. Yeah, credential. So I eventually became a fully credentialed California teacher.
And you taught in?
In California. I went back to California, in the Bay Area.
Okay.
I taught third grade. My first year was structured English immersion. My second year, I got to do the dual immersion program, which was much better. I really loved teaching in the dual immersion program. And there were different families. My first year was so hard.
Do you remember what year you were in Palo Alto?
2004 to 2006. East Palo Alto.
And it's a big difference.
And so Palo Alto and East Palo Alto had at the time the biggest income gap in neighboring cities in the country. And it was just across the 101 from each other. So I would ride my bike to Palo Alto to get groceries or something sometimes and ride back. And you could just feel the difference. There were so many more trees on the Palo Alto side. There was so much more shade. There's more pollution on the East Palo Alto side. You could feel the environmental justice issues. The first year was very difficult because they put all the really violent boys in my classroom. So it was hard, but the second year was easier because it was a dual immersion program and the parents were really involved because they felt, because they could speak the same language as all the teachers. And I'm fluent in Spanish. I'd studied abroad in Oaxaca, Mexico. I'd taken Spanish every year. So I was able to connect with all the families and my students. And I really loved teaching, but it was the hardest job I think I've ever had.
So you said that you had mixed feelings about the Teach for America program. Do you think it's good that it's banned in Alaska?
I don't know. I think on the one hand, it brings in teachers, right? So it helps with the supply issue. And it was 11% of applicants were accepted the year I applied. So I guess you get talented people.
Cream of the crop, yeah.
Yeah. But in my experience, it was also really arrogant people who I thought were not always good for the students. Maybe they taught the students math well, but I feel mixed because I don't think they screened for racism. And I don't know. They didn't screen to make sure that they were getting culturally humble people who understood the value of what their students and their students' families brought. It felt like very one-sided. For some of them, there were great people. I met fantastic teachers in the program as well. And like Rachel Blakesley also went through Teach for America and is very critical of it. We just met the other day and had a conversation about kind of what's wrong with Teach for America. I think their relationship with corporations and their corporate funding model can lead to some conflicts of interest. But it did bring teachers in. I'm not sure what the solution is in Alaska.
So then did you decide to go to grad school?
Yeah. So I had this wonderful mentor teacher. Honestly, they're the reason I was able to survive as a teacher, were my mentor teachers. And my mentor teacher was like, you know what? I think you should get your master's in social work. I think that's the path that you're on. Because I kept social working, for my students. I had a student whose mom had him when she was 13, and she was in another abusive relationship, and I was trying to support her to get victim services and just a lot of things like that. And I knew that's where I wanted to be, is supporting kids so that they had safe families. My first year, one of the really violent kids, he had a SWAT team come in his house and arrest his dad in front of him. He was acting out a lot. So I created a little art group for him because he really loved art. And I wanted him to feel competent at something and connect. And years later, I went back. He's like, Ms. Norton-Cruz, I'm working on my anger issues now. Thank you so much for helping me. So I knew I wanted to like work on that side of things. And so she recommended master's in social work. So I came home for a year and I worked at Trailside Discovery Camp again because I'd worked there in college. I worked as a sexual violence educator and victim advocate at STAR, and I applied for grad school. And then I went to the University of Michigan to get my master's in social work.
What was that experience like?
It was a good program. I went to Michigan sight unseen. So that was interesting. But I made good friends there. I loved research and I loved community organizing, which I'd already been doing in college anyway. Like activism was half of my college education. I had a really tailored, cool schooling opportunity that I think prepared me for community-based research kind of jobs. And so I started applying my last semester back in Alaska. And I came home in between my 2 years of graduate school and did an internship up here because I wanted Alaska-specific experience. I missed Alaska so bad when I was in Michigan. I think that's the most homesick I've ever been.
What did you do when you got back?
First, I worked for a collective impact thing under United Way. It was all these different organizations working on youth justice and coordinated community services. So I did a mixture of community-based participatory research and program planning as a contractor. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was like, it's a job. It's exciting. I get to do multilingual research in the Mountain View area. So I got to work with like interpreters and do focus groups with newer speaking Sudanese refugees and with Samoan speakers and with Alaska Native people. And it was really cool.
So was that job advertised as for a social worker?
I don't know.
I'm asking just because I feel like social workers do such a wide range of things.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes wonder if employers even know that they want a social worker for a particular job.
I don't think that one was, because usually when people are specific to wanting social workers, they're usually talking about case management or school social work or medical social work or clinical social work. I get like LinkedIn messages like, oh, we want you for this clinical social work position. I'm like, I'm not a clinical social worker. I don't have my clinical license. Clinical work is a whole other thing. And yeah, I do macro social work, and that's only a small percentage of social workers do that. Sometimes, though, when I read job descriptions, it says this or social work. Yeah.
So you did that job in Mountain View, and then what happened?
Then I went to Bogota, Colombia for a few months. I was dating someone, then engaged, and so I went to Colombia with him. And then I worked at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium for 5.5 years. And that was a really amazing opportunity. So that's where I really got my toes wet with epidemiology and like public health data sets and the statewide surveys like the pregnancy risk assessment monitoring system and the behavioral risk vector and the youth risk behavior survey. And I got to design surveys and evaluations and collect data on violence prevention, the whole thread that went through all of my work, my undergraduate thesis, which was like this huge research project that I did in Oaxaca, Mexico, to all my grad school projects. It was always focused on gender justice and violence prevention, that kind of original thread from when I was 8. And that was the job I got to do at ANTHC, was focused on intimate partner violence and sexual violence. And so then I ended up developing the patient safety cards as a year 2 or 3 project. I ran a maternal child health project in the Northwest Arctic, doing focus groups in the villages. In that job, I got to travel to so many villages and hub communities and really get to know rural Alaska, which is, one of the best things that's really ever happened to me is getting that kind of experience. And then developing an evidence-based best practice approach from healthcare to do universal education in healthcare visits on healthy and unhealthy relationships, and to incorporate that in as part of the screening process and the response process. And so we took that evidence-based best practice, and I did focus groups all over Alaska to really hone these Alaska-specific materials, and then did trainings for tribal health organizations on those, distributed the materials, et cetera. And I'm still doing that today because that grant ended in 2015, but I'm still doing that work with clinics and things like that. So it was really cool.
So I visited your website, or Norton-Cruz and the main feature that I see is the film work. And so I'm curious when you got interested.
Came later.
Yeah. How did that happen?
It actually happened because we knew that this grant was going to end at ANTHC. And we said, we can't keep traveling and doing in-person trainings for tribal health organizations, but we don't want this to go away. So let's make a video training that people can do online and get CEUs for. And so I worked with the ANTHC marketing department. There was some help with videography, and then I actually did a lot of the video editing, and I was the main trainer, and I brought in midwives and doctors and nurses and other folks to help do the training. That was my first video project. And then I also made these video skits to go along with the teen card. I was like, oh, this is really effective. You can do a lot with video. And so then in my next few jobs, I kept doing more video work, not behind the camera, but learning to write scripts and location scout and do model releases and kind of learning all those pieces.
So the film that I know best is the one on childcare that you did in Kotzebue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that your first big video project?
Yeah, that was the first documentary.
Got it.
I did the online training, and then I did PSAs, so usually 3-minute films. I was the producer and director for a few of those in my job at an Alaska Native Village Corporation. And I worked on some with the Alaska Children's Trust. But yeah, that was my first documentary. So I have 3 now. I work with Joshua Alveza Branstetter, who's an award-winning filmmaker. It was actually because I got into the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Culture of Health Leaders. It's a 3-year funded fellowship program, and we had project money, and we just had to do some kind of project that created some kind of structural change for health equity. And since I'd been doing so much volunteer work on childcare as a mom and advocate, I was like, you know what? I think we need film to move people's hearts and minds on this issue. People have been trying to do this for so long, but seems like we're still treated as a niche side issue. And I want policymakers to feel it, to feel the urgency for the economy and for families and for children. And I happened to have a relationship with the Northwest Arctic because of a project I was doing and with Tracy Schaefer and her daughter. And it's like, can we follow you around and make a film about you? And they're like, okay. So we made that first film in 2023. I spent a while doing work for free, just trying to get it out there, showing it to the legislature, showing it in Anchorage with legislators and the commissioner, talking and trying to get Murkowski's staff and trying to get policy attention to it, and figured, okay, hopefully this will show a funder that this is worth investing in, that we can actually make change with film. And so we met with Mat-Su Health Foundation. They weren't quite ready yet. Then we met with Sewer Prevention Coalition, and they were. So they funded us to do filming on the Kenai Peninsula. And they wanted to keep talking about licensure because it had not gotten better. So
Childcare licensure.
Childcare licensure, yes. Because they were helping childcare providers and just coming up with barrier after barrier with the state licensing. And then Mat-Su Health Foundation said, okay, we're ready now. We have partners who are on board. Let's make a film about the infant learning program. Because the funding hasn't been increased in 11 years. Our population is growing so rapidly. It's so hard to serve everyone that we have to. And this program is so important.
What is the infant learning program?
Yeah. So it's a federal program. It's part of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it serves children ages 0 to 3 who have developmental delays or developmental disabilities. And it provides services where the child is at, which is typically their family. It can be with parents, grandparents, whoever their family is, and or with their child care providers. So it's wherever the child spends time, that's where the infant learning program staff go and work with them, because the idea is that you need to incorporate their treatment into their daily routines because they're babies. That's who they're with most of the time. So they don't just take them into an office, spend an hour, give them back to you. They teach you as the parent or the grandparent or the child care provider how to work on their speech delay or their gross motor skills or whatever it is that they need. And it's so effective that something like 54% of children who go through ILP don't end up needing special ed K through 12. Because the first 3 years of life are the most sensitive for brain development, where 80% of the brain develops. So if you get the interventions you need in the first 3 years of life, it's much more effective than if you wait. So that's why we would save $39 million a year if we can expand and serve more kids and serve them more often with more robust services.
And I think people who've done deep dives into school district budgets know just what an incredibly large amount of the budget is special ed. Special ed classrooms are small, having one teacher with just a few students as opposed to one teacher with more students. And that's expensive.
Yeah.
So any way that we can reduce the number of kids who need those special ed services is going to save the entire state money.
Absolutely. It just frustrates me so much to hear People talk about, Don Levy, well, we don't have great outcomes for schools. Why would we keep investing in them? And then to cut the ILP funding. Yeah, there's a reason kids don't show up at kindergarten ready. 30% of kids show up kindergarten ready because they aren't receiving what they need in the first 5 years of life because childcare is so hard to access and so expensive, and not enough kids get ILP who should qualify for it and receive those services and get the kind of parent coaching that they need to know how to help them with their speech delays or their fine motor skills or whatever it is that they need help with, because a lot of that is treatable, but you got to treat it early. So that ended up being our second film. We filmed in January of 2025 in the Matsu Valley. We just had these incredible families who were willing to share their stories and their beautiful babies and toddlers with us. And so then we worked really hard to edit it and have it ready to show to the legislature before y'all got out of session. And so we screened it April 29th in Juneau, standing room only, 18 legislators, dozens of legislative staff, almost the whole Matsu Valley delegation. That's the other thing, is I love doing policy advocacy. So we brought down Valley staff and families who are in the program, and they met with their legislators and invite them personally. And that seemed to make a big impact.
Representative Jubilee Underwood has been just absolutely invested and a passionate advocate for Infinite Learning Program and your film.
Yeah, it's been really great to have her on board. She was the first person I thought of. I was like, we need a Valley champion, because I think we can get other Valley members on, but we need a Valley champion to invite them. And she seemed the most compassionate about those kind of issues and disabilities. Yeah, we just asked her a few times, and then she agreed to host it. And then she co-hosted with us the September screening in the Valley and was on a panel. I think that was great because they were there gathering with each other, participating in the Q&A with each other. And at least Kathy Tilton, I think, changed her position. I think Shelley Hughes changed her position. They were, okay, this is a good program. But then they went from, we don't have the money to, we can't afford not to do this. This is going to cost us money if we don't invest in this. Because that's what we really emphasize is if we invest to serve more children, to change the eligibility criteria, then we will save $39 million a year in K through 12 special ed costs alone. That's not even to mention all the other savings.
So bouncing back to what you wanted to do from age 17 on and basically reduce the amount of sexual violence, specifically towards minors. This is an unusual moment in history that we're living through. I'm going to drop a link in the show notes to your most recent piece in the Mississippi Free Press, which is about the issues being brought up because of the Epstein files. It seems like it's on the news every day. I guess talk a little bit about what that experience has been like for you and how you think we can use this moment in a positive way.
Yeah. The reason I wrote the article is because it's something that I've been talking about my whole life is now being talked about by everyone, but I don't think everyone has the background in understanding victimization and understanding what a survivor feels and experiences, or what can prevent boys from developing abusive behaviors, or what can help someone heal, or what children need to know to be able to protect themselves. There's just so much that isn't part of our standard education, and it's been a huge part of my career, so I want to share it with people so that everyone has the knowledge they need and the attitudes and kind of orientation they need to protect kids. One thing I see is that people, I think, either take too much of a hands-off approach and they just are uncomfortable talking about these topics with young people, with children and teens, and so they don't, and they leave it to other people, and then there's predators out there who
I'll make a gross stereotype.
Sure.
Like in the same way that some people think that if they talk about suicide, they're going to give somebody the idea that they should commit suicide. I think some people feel if they talk about sex or sexual violence with young people, that it's going to make those kids engage in sex. Maybe some of the mentality that's happening.
Yeah, I think some people, in the whole book banning conversation is this idea that, that's inappropriate for kids. And no, it saves lives. It saves them from dying by suicide because they're isolated and abused. Kids need to know what their rights are. Kids need to know that it's their body and that they can control who touches it and how. And there's just so much that I believe we need to be talking about with kids. So part of what I want to do is give parents and other people who work with children the tools to feel comfortable and do that. And that's what the article is saying is even if you're uncomfortable, here's some tools, just look at them with your teen and let them lead the conversation. You don't have to lecture at them. In fact, they probably won't respond well if you lecture to them, but you can explore tools together with them that were developed by people who understand youth and developed by youth, because the cards that we developed were teenagers helped form all the language on it. And then the other part is I think adults need to do a better job of creating safety for young people, not let's make up a fantasy that strangers are constantly kidnapping your kid in the Walmart parking lot. No, that's not how trafficking happens. It's typically people who know you, and they target vulnerable kids. And that's what the Epstein file stuff is bringing up. These were vulnerable kids.
And this has come up in House Judiciary. When I was in the minority and Representative Sarah Vance was the chair, we had a lot of hearings on sex trafficking. And I will never forget an organization that was presenting on risk factors for being sex trafficked. And the number one risk factor is poverty.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is it's a poverty issue. I think it's a lot easier to talk about cartels and strangers and people from foreign countries coming in and leading these big organizations than to talk about poverty, the sex trafficking of people's kids. Like, it's a difficult conversation for everybody.
Yeah, that part especially. But the other major risk factor is if a kid is on the street because, let's say, they're trans or gay or bisexual and their parent doesn't accept them and they kick them out of the house and the kid is couch surfing, in the first few days, they're going to be asked to participate in survival sex. Oh, you want a place to stay? Okay, you can stay on my couch, but here are the terms.
So now we're kind of getting to House Bill 101. So I have a bill, House Bill 101, to raise the age of consent in Alaska from 16 to 18. And when we had testimony from a former administrator at Covenant House, they would see the same men come to pick up 16 and 17-year-old females who were staying there. The female would say that she was going to meet her boyfriend, but the administrator said, we knew that this 30-year-old didn't think that he was in a romantic relationship with a peer, and it would be the same men coming to pick up different girls as the years went by. Bottom line is that those predators knew the law. They knew that 16-year-olds could consent, and they took advantage of homeless young people who, for a meal, for clothes, for alcohol or drugs.
Because getting them addicted is a key part of commercial sexual exploitation of youth.
It is a big problem in Alaska that you were an adult when you were 18 in every aspect of the law, except for with regard to sexual consent. And for some reason, at 16, you're an adult. It's like that's the only part of our law where 16-year-olds are considered adults. And it's problematic. If a 16-year-old believes that she was sexually assaulted, and I use she on purpose because it is generally a female victim, she has to prove that she did not consent. Yeah. And if alcohol or drugs were involved, it can be very difficult. And predators know that law. I can't tell you how many Alaskans didn't know that 16 was the age. They just assumed it was 18.
But predators know.
This brings us back to the Epstein files and that recent interview when Megyn Kelly on her show was talking about how 15-year-olds are different than other children.
I do know somebody very, very close to this case who is in a position to know virtually everything. Not everything, but virtually everything. And this person has told me from the start, years and years ago, that Jeffrey Epstein, in this person's view, was not a pedophile. This is this person's view, who was there for a lot of this, but that he was into the barely legal type. Like he liked 15-year-old girls. And I realize this is disgusting. I'm definitely not trying to make an excuse for this. I'm just giving you facts. That he wasn't into like 8-year-olds. But he liked the very young teen types that could pass for even younger than they were.
Basically, what she says is that she didn't think Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile.
One of my hills that I'll die on is I think it's less useful to go around parsing out who's a pedophile and who's not a pedophile and just focus on the crime. It doesn't matter what their psychological DSM-5 diagnosis is. It doesn't matter even who they're attracted to. What matters is who they rape, who they violate, who they abuse. And they are interested in having power and control over people. And the least powerful people are children, whether they're 5 or whether they're 15. The least powerful people are young people. And especially in the case of trafficking, usually young people who've experienced abuse in their families are often on the street or in foster care and then are targeted for trafficking. And just, it doesn't matter. What matters is that they're targeting young people. And I think we waste a lot of time. Megyn Kelly is like making a straw man argument to try to excuse the fact that all these powerful, rich men abused children, raped children.
Somebody who was testified for this bill, I don't remember exactly who, said there's nothing magical that happens in someone's brain when they're 15 in 364 days and become 16 the next day. There's not like this magical moment in time that now this person is suddenly capable of deciding whether or not they should have sex with someone much older. And just so folks understand, House Bill 101 has a pretty big close in age exemption at 6 years.
Oh, it's 6 years?
It was amended. I felt good about 4 years in both directions. It's now 6 years up, 4 years down. The reason why is because if a 16 or 17-year-old came into an organization for services, was not reporting sexual assault, but mentioned that they had a significant other who was 21 when they were 16, the person that they're telling that to, mentioning it offhand, is a mandated reporter. And if it's outside the close in age exemption, it would be a crime and they would be mandated to report it. And that this would discourage young people from coming to the organizations and seeking help. So in order to not disincentivize 16 and 17-year-olds talking to people, they wanted to expand it upwards to have them feel a little bit more comfortable coming in for another reason and not feeling like if they mention that they have a 21-year-old boyfriend, that guy's going to get arrested suddenly.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, the goal of the bill is not to increase prosecutions of statutory rape. It's not to catch young people who are in love and they happen to be a few days outside of a certain age range. It's to stop predators targeting 16 and 17-year-olds. And people will come up with a lot of hypotheticals. There are folks out there who have stories about their parents. My mother is 19 and a half years younger than my dad. Wow. I am the product of a large age gap.
Yeah.
But she was 26 when she met my dad. There is a difference between a 16-year-old and a 26-year-old.
Yeah. When I was in high school, I realized at some point, I'd say by the time I was 16, that grown men were preying on high school students and middle school students. I heard about it. Girls would tell me about who bought them alcohol and was trying to get them drunk. And I was took it upon myself to try to warn every girl, no, those men are preying on you. They're predators. That's not appropriate for an adult man to try to get drunk with a teenage girl. That's not appropriate for an adult man to try to date you. He should be dating other adult women. I learned that early and tried to warn other kids. So even if I'm uncomfortable with the 6-year age gap with a 16-year-old and a 22-year-old.
For the record, it's 5 years and 364 days, and the law counts it down to the day. Another question that people ask a lot is what happens if they're 5 years apart, but then his birthday comes and now he's suddenly 6 years apart? That's not the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
You guys remain the same distance and age apart, regardless of when a birthday happens.
No, and it makes sense that the primary goal would be so young victims don't have as much of a burden of proof. I remember looking at the data in different reporting sites across Alaska, and the average age of victims in Western Alaska was extremely low. So teenage girls were absolutely being targeted more than any other group. Most of the sexual harassment I have ever experienced was when I was a teenage girl, from 13 on. Most of the unwanted touching in public was when I was very young. Yeah, they don't target older girls and women. So I think this is so important. It's just so important to have clear laws. It's so important also because it took us so long to not have legalized child marriage in Alaska. We're just behind We should be protecting teenage kids.
The other thing that I like to point out is that there's multiple states that have 18 as the age of consent, including some red states, Arizona, Utah, Florida.
Wow. One of the arguments I would have had when I was younger is, but 16-year-olds can consent to have sex with each other. And that's why the age gap thing. Like, we're not saying 16-year-olds can't have sex with each other.
We're not trying to criminalize natural sexual behavior among teens.
Absolutely. This is about stopping adults from preying on children.
Correct.
Yeah. And clearly, from the Epstein file stuff, this is a major problem.
It's just after Thanksgiving that we're having this conversation. I was home in Texas. One of my nephews, who's in college, said, "What do I think about the Epstein files?" They love to talk to a politician about politics. And I just dodged the question. I was like, yeah, I don't really have anything to say about the Epstein files today. Do you ever feel that way? Are you always willing to talk about the Epstein files?
Yeah. But I also don't have antagonistic family members. So, I mean,
they're on your side.
Yeah. Yeah. I just had the most wonderful Thanksgiving with my parents and my sister and my cousin.
When I go home, I'm going to a red state and to a red family. There's different gradations of conservatism.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are definitely Republicans in my family who support the release of the Epstein files and think that Trump's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein is very problematic and should be discussed in the open.
As one should believe, in my opinion. Yeah.
And then there are others who are just true believers who are going to find a way to support the president no matter what, including basically ignoring this. And I don't want to speak for my mother, but I think my mother probably could go down the Megyn Kelly pathway pretty easily. I'm saying they were almost 16. They were practically legal.
Yeah. Except Katie Johnson.
Katie Johnson lawsuit.
She filed a lawsuit before his first election as anonymous. So Katie Johnson, I think, was a Jane Doe sort of name. This was the victim, alleging that when she was 13, she was offered a job and then forced to perform sexual acts with a 12-year-old victim and perform oral sex on Donald Trump. And then he yelled at them and berated them. And this was the victim who he said reminded him of his daughter Ivanka. It sounded credible for multiple reasons, and I read some legal analysis of it. So I read Katie Johnson's whole lawsuit in 2016 before the election. And I heard the recordings of Trump talking about barging in on naked teenage girls in their dressing rooms at the pageants he ran before his first election. And I read the lawsuit. It sounded really credible.
U.S. District Court Judge Dolly G. of California dismissed the Katie Johnson case in May 2016, ruling that Johnson's complaint didn't raise valid claims under federal law. Another version of the lawsuit was filed in federal court in June 2016, but withdrawn in September after apparently never being served to the defendants. The case was refiled later that month and almost immediately dismissed by the accuser's lead attorney with no explanation. I'm dropping a link to the Politico article where I got this information into the show notes. I am also adding a link to a Guardian article from October 2024, which details the sexual assault allegations made against Donald Trump between 1980 and 2013, all of which he has denied.
It matched up with the things he had said on record about his daughter Ivanka, on record about teenage girls, on record about grab him by the, right? All that had already come out. Also, he'd been credibly accused of rape by multiple women at that point. So it made sense to me that this was real. But it just got swept under the rug and he got elected. And it just felt like such a heartbreak. And then when the Epstein file stuff began to emerge, like, well, yeah, of course he's involved. And I think we need the full release to know the full extent, but I don't have a lot of doubt in my mind. And I think it says a lot that we elected a rapist. And then by his second election, he was an adjudicated rapist of Jean Carroll, that we elected a rapist twice. And it's not just in spite of him being a rapist. I think for some voters, that was part of the appeal. I think there's like a culture that has been there, but is growing in popularity of just unrestrained, I have power over whoever is more vulnerable than me. And I'm allowed to do whatever I want to the people less
Well, this will seem maybe like a non sequitur, but Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, or Secretary of War, as he calls it, making it easier for folks to experience hazing, harassment, and bullying by their superiors and making it more difficult for those sorts of complaints to be reported and investigated seems like it's part of a
Absolutely.
similar culture of
Absolutely.
we're not going to have our masculinity reduced by these arbitrary rules. And I think that, I don't know if you can
They
speak
want
to
to
how,
abuse with impunity. They want to not be held accountable. They don't want girls, women, victims of any gender to be able to hold them to account.
and I think that plays into, I mean, again, sorry, mom, but she absolutely had no problem with the grab them by the pussy
Oh,
comments because she said that's just how real men talk.
real men. Wow. I mean, it does. It supports this patriarchal idea of masculinity and of power and of hierarchies, and that I find terrifying. But yes, there are women who I guess have accepted that's reality and that they play into it. And I think it's easier, right? Because you get a certain amount of power if you affiliate yourself, if you associate yourself with male patriarchal power, then you get sort of power by proxy. Whereas if you stand with survivors, you don't, right? You lose a lot. I've done that my whole life. I've always stood by survivors, even as a 10th grader. I remember calling out the boys on the high school cross-country team who had made out with middle schoolers. I was like, that's disgusting. That's predatory. And I was not popular. I was not a popular kid because I called that shit out. And you lose something. You lose certain proximity to power when you call out predatory behavior because predatory behavior is so much the norm. And we have to do it if we want to shift the norm. And I think that's happening. I think there are movements of that happening. But on the other hand, boys and men
Right.
are responding by.
So I feel like we're at such a weird inflection point of, as you said, having elected a president twice who does not reflect the values that I would want my son to embrace when it comes to interacting with women. But at the same time, we're at this moment where there's all this pressure to release the Epstein files, basically to dig deep to find justice for these many women who were abused as children by men in power. And it's hard to hold both those truths in your head at the same time.
It is a strange time. And it's strange because there was all this pressure from the far right to release it because they thought it was going to be damning to Democrats. And that was the whole theory, was release the Epstein files because it's going to implicate the deep state Dems. And it shouldn't be about what party. I guess I'm a registered Democrat, but if Bill Clinton or Larry Summers went down, great. Larry Summers should go down. Right? Any professor who wants to sleep with his mentee and was using his
Epstein as his mentor.
He should go down. I don't care. Take anyone down. If you abuse children, you should be held accountable for it. And so now it's clearly being reflected that it's not just Dems, right? That Republicans are involved in this, and Prince Andrew and whoever else. And I don't know if it's going to mean that we have a reckoning about how to protect teenagers, how to protect children. I don't know if it's going to lead to a reckoning about holding abusers accountable. Okay. I hope so.
We had the Me Too movement, and that was a big cultural watershed moment. But then we get Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, there was so much blowback, right? The backlash by men like Andrew Tate. Yeah, the men who want to not be held accountable, who want to keep their power and their ability to abuse. There's huge backlash from them. And there's a huge media ecosystem that props up men like Andrew Tate and the Canadian Jordan Peterson, and that allows them to infiltrate the minds of little boys through the internet. And there's so much online radicalization of misogyny and white supremacy, and it all gets mashed together in this scary online atmosphere. That's happening at the same time, right? So Me Too is powerful and truthful and so universal, but was up against that. And I don't think our media ecosystem did a good job of saying, no, this is only the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more behind Me Too. They did not go too far. People are still able to abuse with impunity. Our justice system still makes it very hard to prosecute rape or very hard to prosecute other interpersonal violence crimes. There's still not a lot of safety for victims. There's still not a lot to make up for the losses that victims experience in their lives. Can you actually, I don't know this, is the Bill 101 retroactive?
It doesn't work into the past.
Okay, so it only would apply once it's passed to crimes moving forward.
And there was a lot of debate. It's moved out of the House. It's going to the Senate. There was a lot of debate about the fiscal impact and how much it would cost the state to create this law, because the expectation that there would be more arrests and how much will that cost. What's interesting is that Representative Garantar had a bill a few years ago that changed the definition of consent. And that bill had a fiscal note as well, assuming that if we change the definition of consent to make it so that it was easier for a victim to say that they did not consent, that we would have this massive increase in reported sexual assaults that would cost a lot of money. That's not what happened. And as we've already said, predators know that the age is 16. Predators will know when the age changes from 16 to 18. The goal is not to lock more people up. The goal is not to arrest more people. The goal is to make this crime stop happening. It's to make it so that 16 and 17-year-olds are not seen as this easy target. And so I guess folks out there who say that maybe we can't afford to raise the age of consent, first of all, I don't think that we can put a price tag on this. This is something that needs to happen. In the state where the sexual assault rate is 3 times the national average, where the child sex abuse rate is 6 times the national average. I mean,
where we
need
consistently
to be
rank number one in
we
the country
need to be
for
doing
rape.
something.
Yeah.
But I think those folks who throw out these $3 million to $5 million numbers, I just don't believe it. I don't believe it. The bottom line is it's against the law to rape anybody.
Yeah.
So there are cases that already go forward, but they're talking about this particular type of case where it's not as clear cut, where there's a question about consent, where drugs or alcohol are involved. We're talking about a handful of cases that will now be prosecuted, that weren't being prosecuted.
And even if it's
before.
more than a handful, because it's an underreported crime, makes the prosecutor's job easier. And it allows them to bring justice rather than plea dealing out or having to drop charges.
100%. Or charge them with something much less serious that's not that big of a deal.
And I will say, like, when I was doing the focus groups for the cards, I always tell teenagers first, I'm a mandated reporter. This is what this means. This is what they don't. So they have a choice about whether to disclose or not. I did focus groups at Covenant House and McLaughlin Youth Center, where there was already a lot of reports made about abuse that kids had experienced. Like, it was very clear that a lot of youth have experienced sexual assault from adults. Like, the way they talked about it, oh, yeah, there's this guy in the community and there's this. And I had a boy at McLaughlin say, hey, can you make a report? There's this guy who was preying on my 17-year-old sister in the village. And he gave me the information so I could call and make reports. It is common. It is common. And teenagers don't feel like they have recourse. And the teenagers who helped shape the cards, they said, oh, yeah, mainly it's like when someone's blacked out drunk at a party. And so you got to say this, that it's not their fault if someone was bothering them when they were drunk, and that they're not going to get in trouble for drinking if they share this. And it's very clear that this is a problem that adults are taking advantage of and that teens are experiencing. I don't know that would increase report rates, right? Because there's still a lot of barriers to reporting and getting the help you need and being believed and not being retaliated against. It's not going to change all that. So I think it'll still be underreported. But if it leads to more prosecutions, I don't see that as a bad thing at all. And I think we can afford it. I'm sure there's some money. I mean, if you ask me, I think we should close the S-Corp loophole and tax Hill Corp and get more money into the state anyway so that we can pay for things we need, like infant learning program and childcare. But regardless, I don't think cost should be the major barrier. 16 and 17-year-olds should be protected.
Is there a way that people can watch your films?
Yes.
Okay.
We're easy to find on social media. So all our films are on a Vimeo showcase, but Vimeo is a little difficult to search. So you can get the link to the Vimeo showcase on my website. So LauraNorton-CruzConsulting.com. You go to click on film production. All 3 films, the posters are there, and you just click on the poster and it takes you right to the film. You can also find it on Facebook. It's called the Early Childhood in Alaska Film Series. That's our Facebook page. On Instagram, it's called AK Childcare Docu. That's the Instagram handle. And you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. The films are there on Facebook, as well as the link to the Vimeo showcase, and same for on Instagram. Also, the Anchorage International Film Festival, which is a really exciting, prestigious film festival that happens every year. We got one of our films accepted, the Infant Learning Program film, and it's going to screen on the morning of Sunday, December 7th at 10:30 at the Anchorage Museum.
Very cool. Laura Norton-Cruz, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@akleg.gov or call 907-269-0123.